What would you do if the world refused to see your true potential? At the Crestview shooting range, the sharp crack of gunfire sliced through the air as Clara Bennett stepped through the entrance, her modest frame overshadowed by the towering egos inside. Her faded jacket and worn sneakers stood in stark contrast to the polished, high-end gear of the club's elite members, their whispers trailing her like shadows, their snickers barely concealed. Clutching her paperwork with steady hands, Clara approached the registration desk, her heart pounding with the weight of judgment she'd faced too many times before. If you've ever been underestimated before you could even prove your worth, Clara's story will set your spirit ablaze. A tale of hidden brilliance and a justice that strikes harder than a bullet. Join us on Daily Narrated Stories as we unravel a journey of resilience, talent, and triumph that will inspire you to shatter your own barriers. At the registration desk, a broad-shouldered man with a salt and pepper beard looked up, his eyes narrowing as they settled on Clara. "You lost, miss?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension, each word a jagged edge meant to cut. His name tag read Victor Marshall, President. Clara's heart thudded against her ribcage, a frantic rhythm that echoed the distant gunfire outside. But her voice remained calm, a quiet defiance in the face of his scorn. "I'm here for the Advanced Division qualifiers," she said, sliding her registration form across the counter. Her calloused fingers, scarred from years of gripping rifles in unforgiving conditions, went unnoticed by the crowd gathering behind her. The air in the room felt thick, almost suffocating, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to witness her humiliation. She could smell the faint tang of gunpowder lingering in the air, a scent that pulled her back to desert training grounds, the weight of a rifle against her shoulder, and the sting of sand against her skin. Victor skimmed the form with a smirk, holding it as if it might taint his hands. "Miss Bennett, huh? Advanced Division." His tone was a blade, sharp with mockery, slicing through the murmurs of the onlookers. "That's for the big leagues, ex-military, Olympic hopefuls. You sure you didn't mean the beginner's course?" The men around him chuckled, their expensive gear glinting under the fluorescent lights, a stark contrast to Clara's worn attire. Her hazel eyes flickered with a quiet storm, a tempest of emotions she kept tightly reined, but her face stayed neutral. She felt the sting of their laughter, each snicker a reminder of the countless times she'd been underestimated. Not just here, but in every room where her skills were overshadowed by her appearance. "I've met all the requirements," she replied, her voice soft yet unyielding, though inside, a flicker of doubt gnawed at her. "What if they're right? What if I've been away too long? I'd like to proceed." Victor leaned closer, his breath hot and sour, his voice a low growl that sent a shiver down her spine. "This isn't a backyard target game, sweetheart. Why don't you step aside for the real shooters? We're busy with regionals." The air grew heavy, the distant pop of gunfire outside, the only sound breaking the silence. Clara's gaze drifted to the electronic scoreboard on the wall, its glowing numbers a stark contrast to the dim lighting of the room. Her lips twitched with a hint of amusement as she read the morning scores, noticing a pattern in the data that only someone with her background would catch. An inconsistency in the wind adjustments that the top shooters had failed to account for. "Your rules say anyone who qualifies can compete," she said simply, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade, steady and sure despite the storm raging inside her. "I've paid, passed the checks, and I'm ready." The tension thickened as an older man in the corner, sipping coffee, looked up from his cup. His weathered face held no trace of the other's amusement, his eyes sharp and discerning. They caught a glint of metal at Clara's collar, a military dog tag that had slipped free from her jacket, its eagle insignia catching the light. Recognition flashed across his face. Though he stayed silent, his interest piqued. The dog tag bore the mark of an elite unit, one he hadn't seen in years, and it stirred memories of a young recruit who'd once turned a grueling training session into a masterclass of precision. Victor sighed, waving a dismissive hand, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Fine. Lane 12 is open. Don't expect us to hold your hand when you miss the target entirely." Laughter erupted as Clara gathered her papers and headed to the range. The dog tag catching the light once more as the older man watched her go, his mind racing with questions about the woman who seemed so out of place, yet carried herself with unshakable resolve. 10 years ago, under a blistering sun at a military base, a younger Clara lay prone on the desert floor, sweat beading on her brow, stinging her eyes as it mixed with the grit of sand. The heat was merciless, shimmering off the sand in waves that distorted the horizon, and the weight of her rifle pressed into her shoulder, a constant reminder of the physical toll this training demanded. Through her rifle's scope, she tracked a target 900 yards away, barely a speck to the untrained eye. Her breath was steady, her focus unbreakable, though her mind buzzed with the pressure of the moment. She could hear the faint rustle of her fellow trainees shifting uncomfortably in the heat, their whispered doubts echoing in her ears. She'll never make it. Too small, too inexperienced. Her palms were slick with sweat, and for a moment, fear gripped her. What if she missed? What if she proved them right? Breathe, adjust, fire. Her instructor, Colonel James Carter, whispered, his voice a lifeline in the chaos of her thoughts, steady and reassuring amidst the scorching chaos. The shot rang out, a sharp crack that split the air, followed by a faint ping. A perfect bullseye. It was her 6th in a row, a feat that left even the grizzled instructor stunned. The metallic echo of the hit reverberated through the training ground, a sound that felt like victory against the doubts that had plagued her. James turned to a colleague, his voice tinged with awe as he wiped the sweat from his brow. She's a natural. 6 weeks ago, she could barely lift the rifle. Now, she's out shooting veterans. Clara ignored their murmurs, adjusting for her next shot, her mind already calculating the slight shift in wind speed she'd noticed. A breeze that had picked up just enough to nudge her bullet off course if she didn't account for it. Her chest swelled with a quiet pride, but the weight of her journey pressed down on her, a reminder of how far she still had to go. She hadn't come here to be a sniper. With a degree in electrical engineering, she joined the military to design targeting systems, her mind more at home with circuits and algorithms than with firearms. But an aptitude test revealed her uncanny marksmanship, and despite her hesitation, she was thrust into an elite tactical program, one of only 4 women in a sea of men. The first day had been a brutal awakening. She remembered the instructor's cold assessment as he towered over her. You'll never keep up with the physical demands. Her arms had trembled under the rifle's weight, her body screaming in protest as she struggled through drills designed for soldiers twice her size. That night, alone in her bunk, she'd stared at the ceiling, tears stinging her eyes as she whispered to herself, I can't do this. The darkness of the barracks pressed in around her, the snores of her teammates a reminder of the world she didn't fit into. But something inside her refused to break, a stubborn resolve that had carried her through every challenge life had thrown her way. The journey was grueling. Her slender frame struggled with the physical demands, and the psychological weight of constant scrutiny bore down on her like a leaden sky. She recalled a moment of near collapse during her second week, her arms trembling as she held the rifle, doubt clawing at her mind. I don't belong here. The target seemed impossibly far, the crosshairs wavering as exhaustion set in, her vision blurring with fatigue. Her instructor had barked at her to fire, and she'd missed by inches, her first failure in days. The other trainees snickered, their laughter a knife in her chest, and she felt the heat of shame creep up her neck, her face burning as if the desert sun had turned its full fury on her alone. But James had knelt beside her, his voice firm but kind, his hand steady on her shoulder. You're not here to be perfect, Bennett. You're here to be better. Adjust and try again. That moment became a turning point, a spark that ignited her determination. She pushed through, her mind compensating with precision and patience, calculating every variable, wind, heat, even the rifle's imperfections. By the end of her training, she'd shattered 4 records and designed targeting system upgrades that her unit adopted, earning her classified commendations. One innovation, a wind compensation algorithm, had saved her team during a high-stakes mission, ensuring a shot that neutralized a threat from 1,200 yards away. She could still feel the tension of that moment, the weight of her team's lives on her shoulders as she adjusted for a gust that no one else had noticed, her finger trembling on the trigger until the shot rang true. Her teammates had dubbed her the Calculator, a nickname that carried both respect and a hint of awe. But the praise came with a cost. She'd endured whispered comments about her gender, the constant need to prove herself in a world that refused to see her as an equal. The memory of a senior officer's backhanded compliment, impressive for a woman, still stung, a bitter reminder of the battles she'd fought off the range as much as on it. She'd stood there, her jaw tight, her nails digging into her palms as she forced a nod, the words echoing in her mind long after the officer had walked away. One particular mission stood out, a memory that haunted her dreams even now. It was a moonless night in a remote mountain pass, the air so cold her breath fogged in front of her, the silence broken only by the crunch of gravel under her boots. Her team had been tasked with neutralizing a high-value target, a man whose actions threatened countless lives. The shot was at 1,500 yards, an impossible distance for most, with swirling winds that shifted unpredictably. Clara had lain in the snow for hours, her body numb, her scope fogging with her breath as she waited for the perfect moment. Her team whispered over the radio, their voices tense with doubt. "She can't make this shot. We need to pull back." But Clara had silenced them with a single word, "Wait." She'd felt the wind shift, a subtle change that only her honed instincts could detect. And when she fired, the shot was true, the target neutralized with a precision that saved her team and countless others. That night, as they trekked back to base, her team leader had clapped her on the shoulder, his voice gruff with respect. "You're a damn miracle, Calculator," he'd said. And for the first time, Clara had felt truly seen. Not as a woman, not as an anomaly, but as a soldier. Clara's mind flickered to another memory, a night exercise that had pushed her to her limits in ways she hadn't expected. It was a simulated rescue mission under a starless desert sky, the air biting with a rare chill, the faint glow of an infrared marker, her only guide in the near-total darkness. Her unit had to hit a moving target at 800 yards, a task that tested not just skill but nerve, with failure meaning a mock casualty for her team, a mark against her record. Her hands had trembled, not from the cold, but from the pressure, the weight of her team's trust pressing down on her. The crackle of the radio in her ear brought James' voice, steady but urgent. "You've got this, Calculator. Trust your instincts." She'd taken a deep breath, the icy air searing her lungs, and fired. The shot had been perfect, the infrared marker blinking out as the target was hit, her team erupting into cheers over the radio. That night, back at base, James had pulled her aside, his eyes gleaming with pride. "You're not just a shooter, Clara," he'd said. "You're a leader. Don't ever forget that." That memory, buried deep for years, now fueled her resolve as she prepared to face Victor's challenge at Crestview. Another memory surfaced, one that had shaped her in ways she hadn't fully understood at the time. It was during a joint training exercise with an allied unit, a rare chance to test her skills against international snipers. The competition was fierce, the air thick with the scent of gun oil and the tension of unspoken rivalries. Clara had been paired with a British sniper named Thomas, a wiry man with a sharp wit and a reputation for precision. He'd underestimated her at first, his tone teasing as he'd said, "Let's see if you can keep up, Calculator." But by the end of the day, after Clara had outshot him in a grueling 1,000-yard challenge, his tone had changed. "You're a bloody marvel," he'd said, his accent thick with admiration, offering her a rare salute as the other snipers watched in stunned silence. That moment had been a quiet victory, a reminder that her talent could cross borders and break through even the toughest barriers. There was another layer to that memory, a moment of vulnerability that Clara rarely allowed herself to revisit. After the competition, as the other snipers gathered to share stories over a campfire, Clara had lingered on the outskirts, her hands wrapped around a tin mug of lukewarm coffee. The flickering flames cast shadows on the faces around her, laughter and camaraderie filling the air, but she felt like an outsider looking in. Thomas had noticed her solitude and approached, his expression softer than it had been during the day. "You don't join in much, do you?" he'd asked, his voice gentle, devoid of the earlier teasing. Clara had shrugged, her gaze fixed on the fire, the warmth doing little to ease the chill in her chest. "I'm used to being on my own," she'd admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's easier that way." Thomas had nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "You're a marvel, calculator, but you don't have to do it alone," he'd said, his words a quiet offer of friendship that Clara hadn't known how to accept. She'd smiled faintly, the gesture more for his sake than her own, but the loneliness lingered, a shadow that followed her long after the fire had died out. Now, at Crestview, James Carter sat in the corner, watching his former protege face the same biases she'd conquered years ago. He recognized her instantly, despite her civilian clothes and reserved demeanor. The way she carried herself a quiet echo of the soldier she'd been. Why had she hidden her talents, trading a sniper's scope for a calculator as an engineer? He respected her choice to remain anonymous, deciding to let her story unfold on her terms, though a part of him ached to see her reclaim the recognition she deserved. He remembered the day she'd left the military, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion as she'd told him, "I need a life where I don't have to fight for every inch of respect." Her voice had been steady, but he'd seen the weariness in her posture, the toll of years spent proving herself. He'd understood, but seeing her now, he wondered if she'd finally found the courage to step back into the light, to let the world see the brilliance she'd buried for so long. James' thoughts drifted to a conversation they'd had during her final week in the service, a quiet moment after a long day of training. They'd sat on the edge of a dusty training field, the sun setting in a blaze of orange and gold, the air cooling as the day gave way to night. Clara had been unusually reflective, her voice soft as she'd spoken about her future. "I don't know what comes next, sir," she'd said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I've spent so long fighting to be seen, but I'm tired. I want a life where I can just be." James had nodded, his heart aching for the young woman who'd given so much, who'd faced so much. "You'll find it, Clara," he'd said, his voice firm with conviction. "But don't forget who you are. The world needs people like you. People who can change it, even when it doesn't want to change." Those words had stayed with her, a quiet anchor in the years that followed. And now, as James watched her at Crestview, he saw that spark reigniting, a fire that had never truly gone out. In the equipment room, Clara inspected the club's standard rifle with meticulous care, her fingers tracing its components with the ease of a surgeon, each touch a ritual honed by years of practice. The weapon was decent, but far from the custom pieces she'd used in the military, its scope slightly misaligned in a way that would throw off a less experienced shooter. She noticed the flaw immediately, her engineer's mind already calculating the adjustment needed to correct it. Her hands moved with precision, adjusting the sight with a small tool from her pocket, her movements reflecting a decade of muscle memory. The air in the room was cool, a stark contrast to the heat of the desert she'd trained in, but she felt a bead of sweat trickle down her spine, a reminder of the stakes she faced. Her reflection in the glass cabinet showed a woman transformed, focused, unyielding, a far cry from the uncertain recruit she'd once been. But as she caught her own gaze, a flicker of doubt surfaced, a whisper in the back of her mind. What if I've lost my edge? What if the years away have dulled my instincts? As she worked on the rifle, Clara's thoughts drifted to a moment from her early days in engineering, a quiet victory that had reminded her of the strength she carried. She'd been working on a project for a tech firm, designing a prototype for a new targeting system, when her team lead, a man who dismissed her ideas as too ambitious, had challenged her to prove her concept in a live test. The test range was a small, industrial facility, the air heavy with the scent of oil and metal, the hum of machinery a constant backdrop. Clara had stood at the control panel, her fingers steady as she input the final adjustments, her heart pounding with the weight of the moment. When the system performed flawlessly, outperforming every other prototype. Her team lead had been forced to admit his mistake, his gruff apology a rare acknowledgement of her skill. That moment had been a reminder of the precision she'd honed in the military, a quiet echo of the soldier she'd been. And it had given her the confidence to keep pushing forward, even in a world that often tried to hold her back. After leaving the military, Clara had chosen a quieter life, stepping away from the relentless pressure of competitive shooting. Engineering offered the precision she craved without the scrutiny, a world where her skills could speak without the baggage of her gender. She'd built a life of quiet satisfaction, finding solace in the orderly world of circuits and equations, where misplaced wire was the only thing she had to prove wrong. But seeing Crestview's ad for their revolutionary targeting system, technology she'd helped pioneer, stirred something deep within her, a fire that had never truly gone out. She couldn't ignore the irony of her innovations being flaunted in a place that would dismiss her outright. The ad had been a slap in the face, a reminder of the world she'd left behind, and a challenge she couldn't refuse. Today, she was done hiding, but the weight of that decision pressed down on her, a mix of fear and resolve battling in her chest as she prepared to step back into a world that had once tried to break her. Victor appeared at the doorway, his smirk dripping with arrogance, his presence a storm cloud in the small room. "Hey lady, if you want to stick around, I could use someone to fetch coffee. Women still know their place, right?" His words were a slap, a deliberate attempt to belittle her, and Clara felt the heat of anger rise in her throat, a burning fury that threatened to spill over. But she swallowed it, her training kicking in. Control your emotions, focus on the target. "Thank you, Mr. Marshall," she replied, her politeness a shield for the steel beneath, her voice steady despite the tremor of rage in her chest. "I'll take my turn at the range instead." His surprise was fleeting but satisfying as she walked past him to lane 12, her heart pounding with a mix of defiance and nerves. The hallway to the range was lined with trophies, a gallery of male faces staring down at her. Their legacy, a silent challenge she was determined to upend, each step echoing with the weight of her past. The qualification round was a 3-tier challenge, designed to weed out all but the best, a gauntlet meant to separate the amateurs from the elite. Most newcomers failed at the 2nd tier. Even seasoned shooters struggled with the 3rd. Clara felt the weight of every stare as she took her position, the crowd's anticipation of her failure almost tangible, a heavy presence that pressed against her. Victor and his son, Nathan, stood among the spectators, their smug expressions mirroring each other, their arms crossed in a shared arrogance. $10, she doesn't even hit the target," Nathan muttered, loud enough for the crowd to hear, his voice carrying a cruel edge. Bets were placed as Clara settled the rifle against her shoulder, the familiar weight grounding her, a tether to the soldier she'd once been. She could hear the faint hum of the range's ventilation system, a steady drone that faded as she focused, her world narrowing to the target ahead, the rest of the room falling away. Her first shot at 100 yards was flawless, a dead center hit that silenced the laughter, the bullet hole a perfect circle in the paper target, a testament to her precision. The crowd's murmurs shifted from mockery to surprise, a ripple of unease passing through them as they realized she might not be the easy target they'd expected. "Beginner's luck," Victor scoffed, though his confidence wavered, his eyes darting to the scoreboard as if searching for a flaw in the result, his jaw tightening with each passing second. The 2nd tier, 3 shots at 200 yards with a simulated crosswind, produced 3 perfect hits, the bullet holes so tight they formed a single jagged mark. The wind simulation had been tricky, a gust that shifted mid-shot, but Clara had felt it coming, her instincts honed by years of training, her body moving almost on autopilot as she adjusted her aim. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, their skepticism fading, replaced by a tense curiosity that hung in the air like smoke. By the 3rd tier, moving targets at varying distances, Clara's precision left them speechless. The targets moved erratically, designed to mimic real-world conditions, but Clara tracked them with an almost supernatural calm, her shots landing with unerring accuracy, each hit a quiet rebuke to the doubts that had filled the room moments before. As the targets were brought forward for inspection, a young woman in the crowd, a new member named Ellie, watched with wide eyes, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Ellie had joined Crestview just a month ago, drawn by the promise of learning to shoot, but intimidated by the club's reputation as an old boys network. She'd faced her own share of dismissive comments. Her dreams of becoming a competitive shooter met with skepticism from the moment she'd walked through the door. But seeing Clara, a woman who looked like she didn't belong yet outperformed everyone, lit a spark in Ellie's chest. She whispered to the person next to her, her voice trembling with hope, "If she can do it, maybe I can too." Clara caught Ellie's gaze as she stepped back from the lane, offering a small, encouraging nod, a silent promise that this space could belong to her too. As Clara walked back to her lane to prepare for the exhibition match, she passed a group of younger club members, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Among them was a teenage boy named Lucas, barely 16, who had been coming to Crestview with his father for years but had never felt truly welcome. Lucas had always been shy, his small stature and quiet demeanor making him a target for the older members' teasing. He dreamed of becoming a marksman, inspired by stories of sharpshooters he'd read about in history books, but the constant belittling had eroded his confidence. Watching Clara, though, something shifted inside him. Her calm precision, the way she carried herself despite the mockery, reminded him of the heroes he admired, people who didn't let the world define them. He clutched the strap of his worn backpack, his fingers tracing the outline of a small medal his grandfather had given him, a token from his own military days. Lucas made a silent vow to himself. He'd ask Clara for advice after the match, no matter how nervous he felt. If she could stand up to Victor, maybe he could find his own courage too. James watched from the sidelines, a proud smile tugging at his lips, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and nostalgia. She was holding back, he knew, revealing just enough to qualify without exposing her full potential. He remembered a training exercise where she'd done the same, deliberately missing a shot to avoid drawing too much attention, a strategy that had kept her safe in a world that wasn't ready for her brilliance. But here at Crestview, he could see the fire in her eyes, a determination to prove herself on her own terms, a flame that had never truly gone out. "Who is she?" a member whispered, the question rippling through the crowd, their voices a mix of awe and disbelief, their earlier mockery replaced by a dawning respect. Victor's expression darkened, his pride stung by this unexpected turn, his hands clenching into fists as he struggled to maintain his composure, the weight of his own arrogance pressing down on him. Approaching Clara with forced civility, he spoke, his voice tight with barely concealed frustration. "Well, Miss Bennett, you've qualified. But the real competition next Saturday will be tougher. You might want to reconsider." His words were laced with a challenge, a last-ditch effort to regain control, to reassert his dominance over a situation slipping from his grasp. Clara met his gaze, her eyes steady, a quiet storm brewing behind them. "I'll be here," she replied, her quiet certainty unnerving him further, her voice a promise that sent a shiver down his spine. She could feel the weight of his stare as she turned away, a predator sizing up prey, but she refused to let it shake her. She'd faced worse than Victor Marshall, deserts, war zones, and the unrelenting pressure of a world that didn't want her to succeed. This was just another battlefield, and she was ready to fight, her resolve a fire that burned brighter with each step she took. Nathan and two other members blocked Clara's path as she turned to leave, their faces no longer amused but wary, their postures tense with suspicion, their eyes narrowing as they studied her. "We dig deep for the advanced division," Nathan said, his tone accusatory, his voice low and menacing, a threat wrapped in a question. "Odd that someone with your skills isn't on any competitive circuits. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Clara's stomach tightened, the implication clear. They were looking for any excuse to disqualify her, to protect their fragile hierarchy, to keep their world as it had always been. She opened her mouth to respond, her mind racing for a reply that wouldn't give them the ammunition they sought. But before she could, James stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife, steady and commanding. "I know exactly who she is," he said, his eyes on the eagle insignia of Clara's dog tags, a symbol of an elite unit he'd once served with, a badge of honor that spoke of battles fought and won. "And I'll stake my 40 years of reputation on her right to compete." The week before the preliminaries buzzed with unease at Crestview, the air thick with whispers and sidelong glances. Clara's performance had shaken the club's hierarchy, and James' endorsement both protected her and intensified scrutiny, casting a spotlight she'd spent years avoiding. Victor, a former Olympic alternate who'd built Crestview as his personal empire, pored over Clara's redacted military files, frustrated by their classified status, his fingers drumming on the desk as he stared at the screen. "She's no ordinary soldier," he told Nathan, his voice tight with suspicion, his eyes narrowing as he spoke. The office was dimly lit, the glow of the computer casting harsh shadows across his face, a reflection of the storm brewing inside him. He couldn't stand the thought of being upstaged, especially by someone who didn't fit his vision of a real shooter, someone whose very presence challenged the world he'd built. Meanwhile, Clara and James met at a diner far from the club, the scent of coffee and fried eggs filling the air as they sat in a corner booth, the worn leather seats creaking beneath them. The diner was quiet, the kind of place where secrets could be shared without fear of being overheard, and Clara felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in days, the clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation a soothing backdrop. "Why now?" James asked, his voice gentle but probing, his eyes searching hers for the truth. Clara traced her coffee cup's rim, her voice soft, her eyes distant as she spoke, lost in memories she'd buried deep. "Seeing my targeting system in their ad, in a place that would never give me a chance, it hit me hard. After a decade of hiding my skills to avoid judgment, I couldn't stay silent." She paused, her fingers tightening around the cup, the ceramic warm against her skin, grounding her as she spoke. "I used to dream of a day when I wouldn't have to prove myself every second, when my work could speak for itself. But seeing my designs celebrated in a place that would reject me, it felt like a betrayal." James nodded, understanding the deeper battle she'd fought against systemic biases, his own memories of her struggles flashing through his mind. He remembered the countless times he'd seen her overlooked, the quiet strength she'd shown in the face of adversity, the way she'd carried herself with dignity even when the world refused to see her worth. "You've always been more than they could see," he said, his voice thick with pride, his hand reaching across the table to squeeze hers briefly, a gesture of solidarity. "But Victor won't let this go easily. His ego can't handle being challenged, especially by someone like you." Clara's lips curved into a small, determined smile, a spark of defiance lighting her eyes. "Then I'll just have to keep proving him wrong," she said, her voice steady, though a flicker of fear lingered in her gaze. What if Victor found a way to stop her? What if this was a battle she couldn't win? The preliminary round arrived, a grueling test at 300 to 600 yards with variable winds, a challenge that pushed even the best shooters to their limits. Clara's modest gear stood out against the custom rifles around her, a stark reminder of the odds stacked against her, her worn rifle a symbol of the uphill battle she faced. Just as she checked in, the intercom crackled, its static cutting through the hum of the range. "Clara Bennett, report to the judge's table. There's an issue with your registration." Victor and two officials waited, smug satisfaction on their faces, their eyes gleaming with the anticipation of victory, their postures rigid with confidence. "Miss Bennett," Victor began, his voice formal but laced with malice, each word a calculated strike. "Your military records suggest undisclosed specialized training. Competitors must declare all relevant experience." Clara's heart raced, a frantic drumbeat in her chest, but she remained composed, her hands steady as she examined the documents they presented, her engineer's mind already analyzing every detail. The form asked for civilian competition experience. "I have none, and my military records are classified. I'm legally bound to respect that," she said, meeting Victor's gaze with unflinching resolve, her voice a quiet challenge that belied the storm inside her. James stepped in, his authority undeniable, his presence a shield against Victor's accusations. As a founding member, I can confirm classified service isn't required to be disclosed, he said, his voice steady, his eyes daring the judges to contradict him. The judges hesitated, their confidence shaken, their earlier certainty crumbling under the weight of James' reputation. But Victor pressed further, his voice rising with desperation, his face reddening as he spoke. We also found unauthorized modifications to your rifle during qualifiers, a serious violation. Indignation flashed across Clara's face, her composure cracking for the first time, her eyes blazing with a fire that had been smoldering since she'd walked into Crestview. I made standard adjustments, sight alignment, stock positioning. Nothing illegal, she said, her voice sharp with defiance, her hands clenching at her sides as she fought to keep her anger in check. James backed her up, his tone unwavering, his gaze locked on Victor's. I observe around. The adjustments were within bounds, he said, his voice a steady anchor in the rising tide of tension. After a tense standoff, the judges allowed her to proceed, their reluctance palpable, their shoulders slumping as they realized they couldn't stop her. But Victor issued a final challenge, his voice a low growl that echoed through the room. If you're so skilled, let's have an exhibition match on our new digital range. Pure skill, no excuses. Clara accepted, sensing both a trap and an opportunity, her mind already racing with possibilities. What was Victor planning, and how could she turn it to her advantage? The exhibition match followed the preliminaries, turning a routine event into a showdown that had the entire club buzzing with anticipation. Clara advanced through the preliminaries with calculated restraint, placing 5th among 8 finalists, her shots precise but not dominant, a strategy to keep Victor off balance, to make him underestimate her even more. Victor took the stage, his voice booming as he addressed the crowd, his confidence a mask for the unease beneath. Today we'll test our state-of-the-art targeting system and Miss Bennett's so-called skills. 5 shots at 800 yards, variable winds, all analyzed by the system. He announced, his words a challenge that hung in the air like a storm cloud. The crowd moved to the indoor range, its massive digital displays ready to show every detail, the air buzzing with anticipation. The tension so thick it was almost tangible. Clara went first, inspecting the rifle with a careful eye, her fingers tracing the barrel as she noticed subtle sabotage. Off-balance weight, misaligned sights, small but deliberate flaws meant to throw her off. More alarming was a discrepancy in the wind speed indicators, a deliberate error she recognized from her own system designs, a betrayal of the technology she'd created. Trusting the readouts would mean missing her shots, a failure that would give Victor the victory he craved. For a fleeting moment, she hesitated, her finger hovering over the trigger, her breath catching in her throat as she debated whether to call out the manipulation. Her heart pounded, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. What if she was wrong? What if this was a test she couldn't pass? But she trusted her instincts, adjusting mentally, her mind racing through calculations she'd done 1,000 times before, her training taking over as she pushed the doubt aside. Her 5 shots landed perfectly, grouping so tightly they formed one whole, a single jag mark that spoke of a precision few could match. The crowd gasped as the system confirmed her mastery, their awe a tangible force in the room, a wave of sound that washed over her. Victor's turn followed, and Clara noticed the technician adjust the settings to correct the wind readings for him. The movement so blatant it drew uneasy glances from the crowd, a ripple of discomfort passing through the spectators. His shots were solid, but lacked her precision, the results showing a clear gap, the digital display a stark testament to his shortcomings. Clara spoke up, her voice calm but firm, the weight of her words cutting through the tension, each syllable a quiet accusation. There were calibration errors during my round. The wind readings didn't match the actual conditions. I compensated because I know this system, she said, her gaze steady as she met Victor's eyes, daring him to deny it. Victor's face reddened, his hands clenching at his sides, his composure fraying as he spoke. "Technical glitches happen. We'll fix it for the finals," he said, his voice tight, his words a weak attempt to dismiss her accusation. Clara proposed a final test, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "One shot each, 1,000 yards, verified settings." "I'll take the last shot," she said, her words a challenge that left no room for retreat. Victor agreed, his jaw tight with reluctance, his eyes narrowing as he realized he'd been backed into a corner. James ensured the system's integrity, his presence a silent reassurance, his thoroughness leaving no room for manipulation. Victor shot first, landing within 2 inches of center, a strong performance that drew applause, a ripple of approval from the crowd. He turned to Clara with a triumphant smirk, his confidence restored, his posture straightening as he spoke. "Your turn, Miss Bennett. Good luck beating that," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance, a challenge that echoed through the room. Clara approached the lane, her movements fluid, every adjustment precise, her body a study in calm efficiency. The room fell silent, a weighted anticipation hanging in the air, the kind of stillness that precedes a storm. Every eye locked on her. James watched, knowing the stakes went beyond this moment. Clara's skills had once saved lives in war zones, her precision a lifeline in the chaos of battle, a talent that had turned the tide in moments of desperation. Her shot rang out, a clean report that echoed through the range, followed by absolute silence as everyone turned to the digital display. For a moment, the system appeared to glitch, not immediately registering the impact, a tense pause that stretched on like an eternity. Then the results appeared, and an audible gasp swept through the room. Her bullet had struck the absolute dead center of the target, a perfect shot at a distance most civilian shooters would consider nearly impossible. But it wasn't just the accuracy that stunned onlookers. The monitor displayed analytics about impact, force, and velocity exceeding the parameters the system was designed to measure. A warning flashed, measurement limits exceeded. Clara's shot had broken the technology she'd helped create, a final, undeniable proof of her mastery that left the crowd in awe. Victor stared at the screen, his confidence shattered, his hands trembling as he gripped his rifle, his knuckles white with the force of his grip. A technician approached, bewildered, his voice shaking as he spoke, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Sir, her shooting pattern matches the system's original calibration protocols, set by the lead designer," he said, his words a revelation that hung in the air. James stepped forward, smiling broadly, his voice carrying a note of triumph, his pride in Clara evident in every word. "That's because Clara Bennett designed this system during her service with the Advanced Tactical Systems Division. You've been using her technology all along," he said, his gaze shifting to Clara, a silent acknowledgement of her brilliance. Clara confirmed quietly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment, a calm that belied the storm of emotions inside her. "The core algorithms are mine, though this civilian version has limitations," she said, her words an understatement that only emphasized the gap between her expertise and the assumptions made about her. Nathan's jaw dropped, his earlier hostility replaced by stunned disbelief, his eyes wide as he processed the revelation. "You designed this? Then why are you an engineer? Why not compete professionally?" he asked, his voice a mix of confusion and genuine curiosity, the first time he'd spoken to her without condescension. Clara glanced at James, a shared understanding passing between them, a silent acknowledgement of the battles they'd fought together, the scars they both carried. "I want a life where I wasn't defined by my shooting or military past. Engineering gave me precision without the spotlight. But some skills never fade," she said, her voice soft but resonant, a testament to the strength she'd carried all along, a strength that had brought her to this moment. Crestview changed irrevocably in the 6 months that followed, its transformation a testament to the power of one woman's courage. Clara's story spread like wildfire, inspiring a new wave of members, women, youth, and diverse shooters, who saw the club as a place of possibility, a beacon of hope in a world that often tried to hold them back. Membership grew by 35%, and the walls now displayed photos of varied champions, a stark contrast to the old guard's faded trophies, a visual reminder of the change Clara had sparked. Clara took on the role of technical director, her redesigned training programs unlocking the system's full potential and creating pathways for all skill levels, a legacy that would endure long after she was gone. The club opened a new training center for women and youth, a milestone marked by a ribbon-cutting ceremony, the air buzzing with excitement and hope. Clara stood at the podium, her dog tags proudly visible, a symbol of the past she'd once hidden but now embraced, James at her side, his presence a quiet support. "This isn't just a new building," she said, her voice steady and warm, carrying over the crowd with a quiet authority. "It's a new beginning, a place where excellence is defined by skill, not stereotypes. The lessons we learn here, focus, resilience, precision, teach us to see beyond appearances, to find value in the unexpected." The crowd erupted in applause, a wave of sound that filled the space with energy, and as they explored the facility, Nathan approached Clara, his expression serious but no longer hostile, a young man transformed by the woman he'd once dismissed. "My father wants a word," he said, gesturing to Victor, who stood apart, his posture softer than before, a man humbled by the events of the past months. Victor's voice was sincere as he spoke, his eyes meeting Clara's with a respect that had once seemed impossible. "I was wrong, Clara, about you, about what Crestview could be. My wife joined a new program today. She never felt welcome before. Thank you for changing that," he said, his words a quiet victory, a testament to the power of Clara's authenticity, a bridge built where once there had been only walls. As a reporter interviewed Clara for daily narrated stories, asking what she'd say to others facing barriers, Clara paused, her mind drifting to the countless moments she'd been underestimated, the battles she'd fought to be seen. Expertise speaks when given chance. Sometimes, the best response to being underestimated is to excel so brilliantly that the barriers crumble, she said, her voice steady, her words a beacon for anyone who'd ever felt unseen. Later, James asked, his voice soft with wonder, "Did you imagine this when you walked in that first day?" Clara smiled, her eyes bright with a joy she'd rediscovered, a lightness she hadn't felt in years. "I just wanted to stop hiding. I didn't plan to change Crestview. I just wanted my place in it. But in doing so, I made space for others," she said, her voice a quiet reflection of the journey that had brought her here. Watching a young boy hit his first target under a female instructor's guidance, Clara felt the weight of her journey settle into something new, a sense of purpose, of legacy. The boy's face lit up with pride, a mirror of the joy Clara had felt years ago when she'd first discovered her own talent, a reminder of why she'd fought so hard. Her greatest legacy wasn't the technology or the club's transformation. It was the example she set, that courage to be your full self can rewrite the rules for everyone, a lesson that would echo through the lives of those who came after her. Have you ever been underestimated like Clara? Reflect on a moment when you proved someone wrong and share in the comments. Your story could inspire someone else to break their barriers. Don't miss out on more life-changing stories like Clara's. Daily Narrated Stories brings you tales of courage, hope, and resilience every week. But we need your help to keep going. Subscribe now, comment, and share this video to help us reach 1,000 subscribers by next week. Time's running out. Be part of our community and let's inspire the world together.